Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about a layer of Dungeons and Dragons, the intellectual property layer. Intellectual property, IP. Intellectual property, IP. All right. When I say IP, I mean intellectual property. I'm also going to say Dragon Master. When I say Dragon Master, that means Dungeons and Dragons player. That's what any other channel would call it. I don't think it's the right term. So I say Dragon Master. Dungeon Master, Dragon Master. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this layer, right? So Dungeons and Dragons is the community believes that there's a layer of Dungeons and Dragons that is a game. I don't believe that, but I want to meet the D&D community where it's currently at. You guys are going to join me at some point. I'm very convinced of this. I think 20 years from now, no one will talk about Dungeons and Dragons as a game. I don't think that. I think that nonsense will be done, in my humble opinion. But right now, the community still believes there's a game aspect. There's a game layer to Dungeons and Dragons. I want to talk about all the layers you hit before you actually get to that game layer. All right, so let's talk it through. I've talked about history. I've talked about reputation. I've talked about the table. I've talked about curation. I've talked about Dungeons and Dragons lore. Today, I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons as an intellectual property. Okay, this is a layer. And when a Dragon Master comes to the table, they are, and I honestly get this, I actually think this matters more today than every other layer. This is more important than every other layer. And the reason why is what Dungeons and Dragons has done is it has infiltrated the most powerful, popular intellectual properties in the world to the point where when you come across an intellectual property, you don't know if that intellectual property is a Dungeons and Dragons element, if it's Dungeons and Dragons, right? Perfect example of this. Buddy of mine, he's like, I'm a video game player. No, right? Like, okay, yeah, I see it. Like, some people going to use their time on that, whatever, right? And he's like a Fallout fan. He's a real Fallout fan, right? He's played every single video game, right? Don't get him started on Fallout 76, right? Like, all right, and so, but the new Amazon Fallout show comes out, and he's immediately on it, right? And I was on it too. That's nothing but Dungeons and Dragons, baby. And you're like, wait, how is Fallout Dungeons and Dragons? What are you talking about? You know, you never escape Dungeons and Dragons orbit. Like, and a lot of intellectual properties that think they're outside of Dungeons and Dragons orbit have no idea what's happening. They don't really understand how Dungeons and Dragons has infiltrated them, right? Let's connect Dungeons and Dragons to Fallout. How far do you have to go? Dungeons and Dragons Magic the Gathering. Done. Okay. Dungeons and Dragons official set is Ravnica. Magic, Ravnica is mountains, swamps, islands. I'm sorry, mountains, plains, islands, forests, swamps. All the magic comes from it. Soul rings, the whole nine. That same magic casts every single Fallout card. Magic the Gathering just got huge, massively popular. Can't even afford the cards. It's ridiculously hard to get anywhere you try, right? Magic the Gathering, so Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, Fallout, right there, right? And what's wild is it's all stealth, right? Dungeons and Dragons makes its stealth check every single day. It infiltrates intellectual properties, and once it's there, you're like, well, wait, does that mean that Fallout is just a Dungeons and Dragons realm? 100%, in my humble opinion, 100%. Fallout's not aware of it. Every executive who signed the paperwork has no idea that people are like, oh yeah, of course I use Strixhaven cards in my Dungeons and Dragons game because the D&D canon hardback tells me to use Magic the Gathering. Like, Book of Many Things was like, you use Magic the Gathering in your Dungeons and Dragons. And it didn't say this set or that set. It's like Magic the Gathering, period, end of sentence. No discussion of which sets, right? And it's the creatives managing the suits, right? And so what's happened, and this is why the intellectual property on Dungeons and Dragons is culturally deadly. It is an absolute reaper, right? It is a chest hugger. It goes inside and makes your thing its thing, right? Like, it is an absolute stealth reaper when it comes to intellectual properties, right? And executives are signing multi-million-dollar deals and have no idea that they're setting their entire, like Fallout, every video game, that's just a D&D setting now. It's just a D&D setting. Magic the Gathering, they got their little cute little, oh, here's a pro tour. Nobody cares. You're just, all your base art belong to us. Magic the Gathering is nothing but unbound pages of magic. Magic the Gathering is nothing but unbound pages of D&D canon, in my humble opinion. And nobody gets this. Nobody understands this in any way yet, right? But just like right now, you can go pick up 10 books at Barnes & Noble. 10 different books with people who are like, let me give you an academic treatise on the man known as Gary Gygax. 10 years from now, there's going to be some marketing wonk who's like, oh my gosh, you guys had no idea, right? Here's when Dungeons & Dragons connected to Fallout. Here's when Naomi Osaka became a Dungeons & Dragons character. It's going to be in an academic treatise book on the shelf. It'll cost $50, and the only people who read it will have PhDs. And then 1,000 YouTube channels will squawk out 1/10 of what they're talking about in the book. Just happened with Ben Riggs last year. I'm telling you. The intellectual property on Dungeons & Dragons is more complex and has accomplished more than any intellectual property in the history of humanity. And there are things that have happened on Dungeons & Dragons that aren't even understood yet that will each be their own academic treatise book 10 years from now, right? And every company in the world will go, oh my gosh, how did Dungeons & Dragons become the Netflix of every intellectual property? And no intellectual property mattered until it came to Dungeons & Dragons. I'm telling you. Oh, Lego. Like, there you go. Like, you, man, I'm telling you. It's like, it's so deep. It is incredibly deep. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.